Captain Zilxera's breathing apparatus wheezed as she pressed herself against the crumbling wall of what had once been a galactic peacekeeping outpost. The sound of chittering mandibles and razor-sharp claws echoed through the abandoned corridors. The Vex-High swarm was closing in. "Status report," she whispered into her communicator, her 3 hearts hammering against her ribcage. 12 survivors out of 300, came the reply from Lieutenant Mordell. "We've barricaded ourselves in the armory, but the blast doors won't hold much longer. The swarm, they're not like anything in our databases." Zilxera closed all 4 of her eyes. The Vex-High had emerged from dark space 6 months ago, a hive mind of insectoid nightmares that consumed everything in their path. Worlds that had stood for millennia fell in days. The Galactic Council's finest military forces were scattered like leaves before their relentless advance. In desperation, they had sent a distress call to every species in the known galaxy. Most had already fallen. Others were too far away. But one response had come from an unlikely source, a small blue world on the galactic rim that the Council barely acknowledged. Terra, they called it. Earth. "Captain," her communications officer's voice crackled with static. "We're receiving a transmission from the humans." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing something that made Zilxera's translator malfunction. The being before her looked impossibly fragile, soft pink skin, only 2 eyes, no natural armor or claws. It wore what appeared to be primitive fabric coverings. "This is Colonel Maria Santos of the Terran Defense Force," the creature said with what the translator interpreted as alarming casualness. "We got your distress call. Sorry we're late to the party." "Colonel Santos," Zilxera managed, "our situation is dire. The Vex-High swarm has overrun our positions. We estimate 40,000 hostile entities planetside. Our weapons are ineffective against their bioarmor." The human's facial expression changed to what Zilxera would later learn was called a grin. 40,000 bugs. That's it? Santos turned to speak to someone off-screen. "Rodriguez, tell the boys to pack light. This is going to be easier than that time we cleared out those fire ants from the Johnson farm." 3 hours later, Zilxera watched in stunned disbelief as human landing craft descended through the atmosphere. The vessels looked crude, practically primitive compared to Galactic Council technology. But as the first humans emerged, something fundamental shifted in the air. They moved wrong. Every other sapient species she knew possessed the instinctive caution of prey animals, heads constantly turning, checking for threats, ready to flee. These humans stalked forward like apex predators, scanning not for escape routes but for targets. "Contact!" One of them shouted, and the forest erupted in violence. What followed could barely be called a battle. The Vex-High, who had steamrolled through galactic civilization like a cosmic plague, suddenly found themselves facing something they had never encountered, creatures that had evolved in an environment so hostile that warfare was recreational. Humans fought Vex-High warriors hand-to-hand and won. They laughed while doing it. When their primitive chemical weapons ran out of ammunition, they improvised with rocks, sticks, and what one human cheerfully called percussive maintenance, using their rifle butts as clubs. "My God," Lieutenant Mordell whispered, watching through a scope as a human female used a Vex-High's own severed limb to beat 3 others to death. "What kind of death world produces creatures like this?" By dawn, the chittering had stopped. 40,000 Vex-High lay dead across the colony. The human casualties? 17 wounded, 0 killed. Colonel Santos approached Zilxera, casually stepping over a Vex-High corpse the size of a small transport. "Bug problem solved," she said, lighting what appeared to be a small burning stick and placing it between her lips. "Though I gotta say, your definition of overwhelming force needs some work. Back home, we call that a light infestation." As the human reinforcements began arriving, ship after ship of these impossible predators, word spread across the galaxy. The Vex-High swarm, unstoppable cosmic horror, had met something worse. They had met Earth.